My name is Arthur Pendleton, and for 45 years, I was an architect. I didn't design skyscrapers that clawed at the clouds or sprawling museums that housed the ghosts of history. My work was quieter, more intimate. I designed homes. I believed that a house was more than a structure of wood and stone. It was a blueprint for a life, a container for memories, a foundation upon which a family could build its future. I brought that same philosophy to my own life, here in our small, green corner of the world in Cedar Creek, Oregon. The house Helen and I have lived in for nearly 4 decades is one I designed myself. It's a modest cedar and glass home nestled amongst Douglas firs, with large windows that invite the soft, filtered light of the Pacific Northwest to spill across the worn hardwood floors. Every beam, every joint, was placed with intention, meant to withstand the quiet tests of time. I thought I had built our family with the same care. The afternoon it all began to unravel started, as so many of our recent troubles did, with the chime of the doorbell. It was a Tuesday, and the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and blooming rhododendrons from Helen's garden. I saw Alara's car, a sleek, silver coupe I was still making payments on, parked in our driveway. Beside her, unfolding his lanky frame from the passenger seat, was Leo. "They're here," I said quietly to Helen, who was in the kitchen, her hands dusted with flour from the sourdough starter she nurtured like a third child. She wiped her hands on her apron, a faint line of worry already creasing her brow. "Do you think?" "I think we're about to find out," I replied, moving to open the door. Alara swept in with a gust of expensive perfume and frantic energy. At 34, she still possessed the restless, vibrant beauty of her youth, but it was edged now with the brittleness I'd come to recognize as the precursor to a request. Leo followed, his smile easy and practiced, the kind of smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Dad." "Helen." "So good to see you," Alara chirped, kissing my cheek. It felt like the brush of a dry leaf. We settled in the living room, the one with the large picture window overlooking the creek that gave our town its name. Helen brought in a tray with her lemon and ginger tea, the familiar, comforting ritual a stark contrast to the tension coiling in the room. "So," Leo began, leaning forward with an air of conspiratorial excitement, "Alara and I have the most incredible opportunity. It's a game changer, Arthur. Truly." I took a slow sip of my tea. I'd learned to wait, to let them build their case. It was always a performance. "We found the perfect space downtown," Alara picked up, her eyes shining. "For a bespoke lifestyle boutique. Curated artisan goods, wellness products, handcrafted jewelry. It's what Cedar Creek is missing. It's what people want." "A boutique," I repeated, my voice neutral. I looked at my daughter, at her designer jeans and the delicate gold necklace that I knew cost more than our monthly grocery bill. I looked at Leo, who hadn't held a steady job in the 3 years he'd been with Alara, flitting from one brilliant idea to the next. "It's a sound investment, Dad," she insisted. "We've run the numbers." "Well, Leo has. We just need a little seed money to secure the lease and for initial inventory. A sort of advance on my inheritance. Just to get us on our feet." There it was. The same request, wrapped in different paper. Last year it was an app for dog walkers. Before that, a plan to import ethically dubious coffee beans. Each venture required an advance on the money Helen and I had so carefully saved, the nest egg that was supposed to be a safety net for her after we were gone, not a slush fund for her whims while we were still very much alive. I set my teacup down on its saucer with a soft click. "Alara," I began, my tone gentle but firm. "We've talked about this. Your inheritance is for your future. It's not a business loan." "But this is my future," she cried, her voice rising. "Don't you understand? We're drowning here. Leo's been looking for work, but the market is terrible. This is our chance to build something for ourselves, for Maya and Noah." The mention of my grandchildren was a deliberate, well-aimed dart. Maya, with my eyes and her grandmother's gentle spirit. Noah, a rambunctious ball of energy who loved the tire swing I'd hung from the old oak in the backyard. Leo placed a placating hand on her arm. "Come on, Arthur. It's not like you're using the money. You and Helen have your pensions, Social Security. This is just sitting there. Why not let it do some good? Let us make you proud. The condescension in his tone, the implication that my life savings were just idle cash, ignited a slow burn in my chest. I had worked for 45 years, often 6 days a week, sketching blueprints late into the night. I'd taken on extra projects, small renovations and consultations to pay for Alara's ballet lessons, her university tuition, her first car, her lavish wedding to her first husband. I had built that nest egg piece by piece, sacrifice by sacrifice. The money is sitting there, I said, my voice dangerously quiet, so that your mother and I can live out our years without being a burden on anyone. It's there for medical emergencies, for repairs on this house, for the simple dignity of not having to ask our child for help. The irony of my last words hung heavy in the air. Alara's face flushed a deep, mottled red. Dignity? You call it dignity to hoard wealth while your own daughter is struggling to get by. She gestured wildly with her hand, and her teacup, perched precariously on the arm of the sofa, tumbled to the floor. It shattered on the polished floorboards, splashing pale tea onto the hand-woven rug we'd bought in Santa Fe on our 25th anniversary. Alara, Helen gasped, rising from her chair. But Alara was on her feet, her hands balled into fists. I can't believe you. You'd rather watch us fail than part with a single penny. You've always been like this, controlling everything with your money. The accusation struck me with the force of a physical blow. Controlling? I, who had never said no, who had bailed her out of credit card debt, paid off her student loans, and subsidized her rent for the last 2 years. The foundation of our relationship, which I had thought was built on love and support, was revealing its true, rotten core. It was transactional. Get out, I said. The words came from a place of deep, weary finality. I wasn't shouting. My voice was barely above a whisper, but it silenced the room. Leo stood up, his easygoing facade melting away to reveal something ugly and sneering. You heard him, Alara. The old man's made his choice. His precious money over his own family. I'm not an old man, I said, rising slowly to my full height, my joints protesting. I am your father, Alara. And I am telling you to leave my house. I walked to the front door and opened it wide. The cool, damp air rushed in, carrying the scent of pine and the distant sound of children laughing down the street. It was the sound of a normal world I suddenly felt very far away from. You'll regret this, Dad, Alara hissed, grabbing her purse. Her eyes were glittering with unshed, angry tears. When you're old and alone, and you need someone, remember this day. Remember you chose this. Her heels clicked a sharp, staccato rhythm across the floor. Leo paused at the threshold, giving me a look of pure contempt. This isn't over, he muttered, before following her out. The slam of the door rattled the large picture window. In the ringing silence, Helen and I stood frozen. On the floor, the shattered pieces of the teacup lay scattered like broken promises. I looked at the dark stains spreading on our anniversary rug, and it felt like a wound in the heart of our home. The week that followed was steeped in a silence that was louder than any argument. Helen and I moved around each other with a fragile tenderness, our conversations circling the Alara-shaped void in our lives. We didn't hear from her. No pleading texts, no tearful late-night calls. This absence was more unnerving than her presence had been. It felt calculated, like the pulling back of a tide before a tsunami. Then came Sunday, Father's Day. I was on the back deck, a place that had always been my sanctuary, with a lukewarm coffee and the Sunday paper. I watched a pair of hummingbirds dogfight over Helen's fuchsia planters, their tiny bodies a blur of iridescent motion. It was a perfect, peaceful morning, yet my heart was a leaden weight in my chest. I thought of Maya and Noah. In years past, they would have been here, tumbling through the house, presenting me with handmade cards decorated with glitter and lopsided hearts. This year, there was only the hollow echo of their absence. Arthur? Helen's voice came from the kitchen doorway. There's a delivery van out front. I frowned. We weren't expecting a package, and Sunday deliveries were a rarity in our quiet neighborhood. I walked through the house to the front porch just as a young man in a generic blue uniform was setting a medium-sized cardboard box on our welcome mat. Arthur Pendleton, he asked, holding out a small electronic device. That's me. Happy Father's Day, he said with a cheerful, impersonal smile. Someone must have really wanted this to get to you today. I signed my name, my eyes scanning the shipping label. It was blank, save for our address and a tracking number. No return address. The box was surprisingly light, about the size of a shoebox, and felt almost empty. I carried it inside and set it on the coffee table, in the very spot where the shattered teacup had lain a few days before. Helen came in from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. Who is it from? She asked, her curiosity tinged with the same unease I was beginning to feel. I have no idea. There's no name. Perhaps it was a gift from a former client or a distant relative. But something about the anonymous, specially timed delivery felt wrong. Helen, ever the more cautious of us, leaned closer, her sharp eyes examining the box. Her fingers traced the edges of the packing tape, her brow furrowed in concentration. Then she drew in a sharp breath. Arthur, she whispered, her voice tight. She pointed to the side of the box, to something I hadn't noticed at all. Don't open it. Why? I asked, confused. I leaned in, my gaze following her pointing finger. And then I saw them. A series of small, almost imperceptible punctures, arranged in 2 neat rows. They weren't damage from shipping. They were precise, deliberate. Helen's voice was barely audible. Can't you see? They're breathing holes. The words hung in the air, charged and terrifying. Breathing holes. My stomach plummeted. We stared at the innocuous brown box, which had suddenly transformed into something monstrous. The cheerful morning light streaming through the window seemed to dim. The peaceful quiet of our home was now filled with a sinister potential. Something's alive in there, Helen breathed, taking a step back. As if on cue, a faint sound came from within the box. A soft, dry rustling. The sound of something scaly and dry slithering against cardboard. We both froze, our own breathing suspended. The rustling stopped. And then, a new sound emerged, faint but unmistakable. A low, drawn-out hiss. Ice flooded my veins. Helen's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with a terror that mirrored my own. The sound came again, a little louder this time, a clear, sibilant threat emanating from the gift sitting on our coffee table. Call someone, Helen choked out, her hand finding my arm and gripping it with painful force. Arthur, call 911. Now. My hands trembled as I fumbled for my phone. My mind was a maelstrom of denial and dawning, horrific certainty. The timing. The anonymity. The cruelty. This wasn't a random prank. This was a message. And as the dispatcher's calm voice came on the line, I had a sickening feeling that I knew exactly who had sent it. 10 minutes later, as 2 police officers stood in our living room, that feeling would solidify into a terrible, heartbreaking truth. The arrival of the police, and subsequently an animal control officer named Mike, brought a surreal sense of procedural calm to the morning's terror. Mike, a gentle giant of a man with kind eyes and hands as steady as oak, handled the situation with practiced efficiency. He carefully slit open the tape and, using a long pair of tongs, gently lifted out the source of the hissing. It was a corn snake, about 3 feet long, its scales a beautiful mosaic of orange and red. Non-venomous, Mike announced, his voice matter-of-fact as he secured the creature in a carrier. A common pet. Frightening if you're not expecting it, but harmless. A shame, really. Someone spent a good bit of money on this fella just to use him to scare someone. After they left, the house was quiet again, but the peace had been irrevocably shattered. The empty box sat on the evidence bag the police had placed it in, a monument to the morning's violation. Who would do this, Arthur? Helen whispered, though we both knew the answer was too painful to speak aloud. But I needed to be sure. I remembered a credit card statement from the month before. An odd charge I'd questioned, one Alara had brushed off as art supplies for the kids. My heart hammered against my ribs as I went into my office and logged into my bank account online. I scrolled through the transactions. And there it was. A charge from 3 weeks prior, just after our last major argument about money. Reptile Kingdom. $185.50. The world tilted on its axis. It wasn't art supplies. It was a snake. And the purchase date confirmed it had been planned, a piece of calculated revenge waiting for the perfect, most hurtful moment to be deployed. Father's Day. All doubt evaporated, replaced by a cold, hollow ache. I walked back into the living room, the truth a bitter taste in my mouth. "I'm going to call her," I said, my voice flat. "Arthur, what's the point?" Helen pleaded. "What good will it do?" "I need to hear her voice," I said. "I just need to hear it." I dialed the number. She answered on the third ring, her tone artificially bright. "Dad, happy Father's Day. I was just thinking about you." The casual cruelty of it stole my breath. "Alara," I began, my own voice of strangers in my ears. "We had an interesting morning. Received a rather unusual Father's Day gift." There was a beat of silence. "Oh? What was it?" she asked, her voice a little too smooth. And then I heard it. In the background, faint but clear, was Leo's voice, muffled, followed by a distinct, suppressed snicker of laughter. It wasn't the sound of someone surprised. It was the sound of someone enjoying a private joke. That small, ugly sound was the final confirmation. It was the sound of my daughter's betrayal. "Nothing important," I said, my voice turning to ice. "Just a delivery mix-up. I have to go now." I hung up before she could reply, the phone feeling slick with sweat in my hand. I turned to Helen. Her face was a mask of grief. "You heard something, didn't you?" "Leo laughed," I said, the words like stones in my throat. He laughed. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The architect, the builder of foundations, the man who had spent a lifetime designing structures to protect and shelter, finally understood. The foundation of my own family was compromised beyond repair. The rot had gone too deep. Love and forgiveness were no longer the right tools for this job. What was needed now was demolition. A clearing of the site to save what was left of the structure. "What are you going to do?" Helen asked, her voice trembling. I looked from her worried face toward my office, where my computer held the blueprints to our financial life. "I'm going to teach my daughter about consequences," I said. "I'm going to teach her what it means to burn down a house." That evening, with Helen sleeping fitfully upstairs, I sat in the soft glow of my desk lamp. My office, always a place of order and quiet contemplation, felt like a command center. Spread before me were the documents that chronicled 3 decades of my love and her entitlement, bank statements, canceled checks, loan agreements I'd never expected to be honored. It was a paper trail of my own enablement. With a deep, steadying breath, I logged into our financial world. I was methodical. I moved with the precision of an architect drawing a final, irrevocable line. First, the credit card I'd given her in college for emergencies. The emergencies had never ended. I found the Authorized Users tab. Her name, Alara Pendleton, smiled back at me from the screen. With a single click, I selected Remove User. A pop-up asked, "Are you sure?" I felt a profound sense of clarity. For the first time in years, I was sure. I clicked Confirm. Next, the automatic monthly transfers. One for her rent supplement. One for her car payment. One for a wellness subscription I was fairly certain was just a high-end gym she rarely visited. One by one, I canceled them. Each click was a small act of reclamation, a severing of a financial cord that should have been cut years ago. I changed the pins on all our accounts, replacing the familiar numbers, her birthday, her childhood address, with dates that belonged only to Helen and me. Our wedding anniversary. The day we bought this house. The entire process took less than 30 minutes. 30 minutes to undo 30 years of learned dependency. When I was finished, I leaned back in my worn leather chair and felt a stillness I hadn't realized I'd been missing. It wasn't anger. It was a quiet, sad, and resolute peace. I had finally stopped trying to repair a faulty structure. I was shoring up my own foundation. The call came at 9:03 the next morning. "Dad, what did you do?" Alara's voice was a screech of panic and fury. "My card was declined at the grocery store." "The grocery store?" "And I got an alert that my car insurance payment bounced." "What is going on?" I took a sip of my coffee, the morning sun warming my face through the kitchen window. "Good morning, Alara. I know you sent the snake." Her sharp intake of breath was all the confession I needed. I don't know what you're talking about. You've gone insane. You're punishing me for no reason. On the contrary, I said, my voice calm and even. I am finally giving our relationship a reason. For years, it has been based on your needs and my resources. I've decided to change the terms. You can't just cut me off, she shrieked. I have responsibilities. I have children. Yes, you do, I agreed. And from now on, you will be solely responsible for them. Your choices, your consequences. Fine. The venom was back in her voice, the old, reliable weapon being drawn from its sheath. If that's how you want it, then you can forget about seeing Maya and Noah. You will never see them again. In the past, those words would have shattered me. They were the lever she used to pry open my heart and my wallet. But something had been cauterized by the events of the last few days. The wound had closed. I took a deep breath. Alara, I said, and my voice was full of a sad, final pity. After the snake and the lies and the complete lack of respect you've shown for me and your mother, I've come to a painful realization. If you are the kind of person who would use her own children as bargaining chips, then maybe keeping them away from me is no longer a threat. Maybe it's a blessing. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. I had taken her most powerful weapon and rendered it useless. I had changed the locks on the one door she always knew how to open. You'll regret this, she finally whispered, her voice choked with a rage that had no place left to go. The line went dead. I set the phone down on the kitchen counter. Helen was standing by the sink, her hands still, watching me. There were tears in her eyes, but behind them I saw something else, a glimmer of relief, of pride. The storm had finally broken over our house, and we were still standing. A few days later, I sat across a polished mahogany desk from Margaret Albright, our family lawyer for the past 20 years. I laid out the whole story, from the shattered teacup to the severed credit cards. She listened patiently, her expression growing more grave with each detail. Arthur, this is more than financial entanglement, she said when I finished. This is a pattern of harassment and intimidation. We need to build a firewall. Over the next hour, we did just that. We restructured my will, removing Alara as a beneficiary entirely. In her place, we established a tightly controlled educational trust for Maya and Noah to be managed by an impartial third party. They would be provided for, but their parents would never touch a cent of it. Then, Margaret drew up the paperwork for a restraining order against both Alara and Leo, citing the threats and the snake incident as clear grounds. Leaving her office, I felt lighter than I had in years. I had not acted out of anger, but out of a deep, abiding love for the life Helen and I had built and a duty to protect it. I was an architect, after all. And I was finally defending the integrity of my own home. The legal documents were served. The silence that followed was different. It was no longer the tense quiet of a Cold War, but the deep, resonant peace of a concluded matter. Some evenings, Helen and I sit on the back deck, watching the light fade over the fir trees. Sometimes a shadow of grief will cross her face, a mother's mourning for the daughter she lost not to death, but to a sickness of the soul. I take her hand, and we sit in the quiet understanding that we did everything we could for far too long. We built her a beautiful, strong foundation, but somewhere along the way, she chose to live her life in the ruins of her own making. I don't know if I will ever see my grandchildren again. The thought is a dull ache, a phantom limb of a future I once envisioned. But I know the trust will care for them. They will have a chance. And they will grow up free from the toxic, transactional love their mother tried to teach them. My love for Alara hasn't vanished, it has simply transformed. It is no longer an open door but a high, strong wall, built to protect what remains. It is the sad, quiet love of a father who, in the end, chose to save the house, even if it meant losing one of its inhabitants to the storm. And in the peaceful quiet of our cedar and glass home, Helen and I have begun, slowly, to build again.